Yeah, well, I'm afraid I haven't got a fancy presentation or anything like that because I've just been asked to comment about what's been said today. And over lunch, some people were saying, I wonder if there's just too much agreement in this room. So I'd like to provide a little bit of disagreement. Tim Byrne, a couple of years ago, the Buckingham Palace decided that it needed a website. Because visitors were saying, why isn't there a website? We want to find out about these things. So being Buckingham Palace, the head of the Queen's household, Sir Bufton Tufton, or whatever his name was, called in Tim Berners-Lee. What's this web? What's this web? Design us a website. And a friend of mine who happened to be there at this occasion said that this was a momentous occasion in human history because it was the person in the world who knew most about the internet meeting the person in the world who knew least about the internet. So I feel rather like Sir Bufton Tufton today. Collectively, you probably all know most about the Internet of Things in the world, and individually, I almost certainly know least. But I wanted to add a little bit of skepticism today, just for the sake of doing so. I get the sense of a certain amount of empire building in this room today. There's lots of clever people who want to think of lots of clever things that we could do with all this technology that they're inventing in their government-subsidized labs. And then there's lots of cunning businessmen who want to find new ways of making money and slap a patent on it and make even more money out of it. And this empire building has been manifested in various ways. I thought a couple of weeks ago that I was coming to an event on the Internet of Things, and now I discover it's the Internet of Everything. I thought we were going to be talking about clever toasters and things like that. Now I learned that we're going to be talking about the smart planet. I thought we were going to be talking about ordinary people and the way that it might improve the lives of ordinary people. But I'm told that there's an elite group of people called quantified selfers, whatever that is. And four things really struck me about what we've been saying today. One is the notion that the public doesn't just get it. They need to be, put through this Leninist process of education so they can see this wonderful world that they ought to be looking at but aren't. I heard the phrase resistance to change, or was it resistance to the change? I heard somebody else said, if we could just convince people that they need these things, that's worrying. Secondly, doublethink. There's an awful amount of doublethink going on here. I once heard a company saying, we're closing down this service so that we can serve you better. We're supposed to live in the age of service, but it's very, very difficult to get any service in the age of service. Whenever I try and phone up my bank or the telephone company or something, I'm told that, it's all going to be automated +5. If you try and book something, if you try and go on the Acela Express in America, you don't talk to a person anymore, you talk to somebody called Julie, which is an automated voice response machine. So what I do is I talk to her in mock Chinese, and after a while she gets so confused that you actually get a real human being, and then you can talk about it. Then I get the sense that there's this notion that if we just take things away from people, if we remove human interaction, then we'll in some way be serving them better. You don't want to see your doctor, you want to, press 5 for cancer, or whatever else it is. And we heard a gentleman talking about how people love to bond with technology. They get pet rocks. They have virtual girlfriends and things like that. Well, there's a medical term for people like that. They're called freaks. These are not normal people who bond with technology in this way. I also thought there's a sort of bias in favor of producers rather than consumers in everything that's been said today. There's a lot of talk about how there's evidence that, 30% of people in some survey might, in certain occasions, want their stuff to be connected to the internet. But actually, when we've been moving forward and seeing examples of stuff being connected to the internet, there's quite a lot of evidence, there's a lot of consumer resistance to this. It was the case in Bakersfield, not my favorite town. I can understand why people who live in Bakersfield are not very happy. But when they started trying to use the Internet of Things to meter the energy they were getting, their energy bills went straight up. There was a huge outcry against all of this, and a court case, and eventually, a lot of dissatisfied people paying more money for less service. And also in Britain, they've been we're obsessed in Britain by the way that this awful local government tries to regulate our behaviour with regard to litter. We think we have a right to just throw litter on the ground. But what they were doing, they were putting sensors into your various packages that you're supposed to put litter into, and then they were punishing people who put the wrong things in the wrong litter things. I also think there's a sort of utopianism about what's being said about the world becoming more efficient in all sorts of ways. There's a wonderful short story by a man called Will Self called The Quantity Theory of Insanity, and the argument of this short story is that there's a fixed lump of insanity, and it just manifests itself in different people at different times. I think there's a fixed lump of prejudice. It just moves to new things. So now the smokers, or the people who drive the expensive cars are the subject of prejudice. And I also think there's a fixed amount of inefficiency and laziness. So if you get lots of smart technology, will it be used to make the world more efficient? I don't know. People might use it. I side with the West Coast rather than the East Coast in this efficiency battle here. People will use a lot of it to play foolish games and waste a lot of time. Will it make buildings more efficient? Well, it might, but it'll also, the very fact of putting these smart devices in my toaster might be regarded as a waste of money and time and effort in itself. There's lots of ways in which there'll be severe resistance to the spread of this new technology. One is simply that the world isn't quite like MIT labs. Last night after dinner I tried to blog because I'm paid to write this sort of rubbish. So I tried to get onto the internet, and it was at a glacial speed. We're staying in one of the best hotels in one of the great cities in the world. The internet, very, very slow, very hard to do just a simple thing, just writing a blog, let alone something complicated. I live in a small village about 50 miles outside London. It's not entirely inhabited by sort of stump-toothed peasants. In fact, there's people from Accenture, there's people from McKinsey's, we're quite close to London. I haven't got a mobile phone connection. The mobile phone doesn't work in this village, 50 miles outside London. So the infrastructure there for this great utopian world that you want to create simply isn't there. There's a lot of cultural resistances to these sort of changes, I think. I think particularly a lot of the medical changes which you're talking about are going to affect older people, and these are the people who really are fearful of adopting these things. They don't want to adopt them. They're very fearful of dealing with machines in the first place. I talked to my father-in-law. He can't deal with the mobile phone or the ordinary telephone, let alone, the smart pill thing. So I think there'll be a lot of suspicion on that front. And I think there are much easier solutions to this problem. You have this very exclusive guild of doctors. If you liberalize that guild, if you allowed lots of people who haven't, been to the top universities and the top schools, who've got slightly low qualifications to help older people with a lot of their medical worries and medical problems, you get much more bang for your buck than you would with these with using these devices. There's lots and lots of nurses and things who could be doing great things. I think you've completely underestimated the political resistance to all of these smart ideas and the public policy problems with them. There's a huge problem with privacy. Do we really want all this information about our houses, about who lives in our houses, what property we have being owned by companies or by the government? What happens if we're stealing a lot of fridges and putting them there? We don't want people to know that. What happens if we're paid rather more than we're telling the taxman? We don't want people to know that. You're underestimating the danger of catastrophic failure if all of these things are connected. Catastrophic attacks, terrorist attacks and the rest of them, hackers, worms, all the rest of that. And I think you're also building very, very elaborate solutions to what are quite often very, very simple problems, rather unnecessary solutions to rather simple problems. We heard about the heating or the air conditioning or whatever it was at MIT going on at 4 o'clock in the morning, so we have to reinvent the world in order to solve this problem. You don't. Somebody could just come along and turn it on at 6:30 or 7:30. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's not beyond the bounds of man. Google apparently has an app which allows you to tell the precise ratio of men to women in whatever bar you're around, so you can go to the ones, whether there are more of one or the other, whatever your preferences are. Well, you can do that quite simply. You can look through the window. You don't need these machines selling you this sort of nonsense. We heard about nappies, or diapers, as the Americans call them. Do they need to be changed? There is an easy way of doing that. You don't need a machine. We heard about umbrellas that glow blue if it's raining. Well, there are weathermen, and they're often wrong, but so would the blue thing be. And I think also this whole process, to be slightly more serious for a moment, this whole process of the very rapid automation of services, which is all part of, I think has extremely worrying social consequences, which nobody has begun to address today. We've seen the devastation of manual work, the manufacturing sector. We have 10% unemployment in the United States, 20% unemployment in Spain at the moment. If you're going to see the same process of automation of services going through, what are people going to do? Where is the work going to come from? Or are we going to have just a gigantic, permanently unemployed helot class? So I think the utopia that you're talking about has another side to it, but an essay seemed to be too negative. I really like that infomercial for that plant thing. I'm definitely going to get that. Thank you.